So this is Justin's Martin 0015M mahogany top. I've just finished calibrating the whole thing, bridge, action, intonation, the compensated neck, compensated saddle. But before I go into the details of what I went through to get this guitar to this point, we're going to start the video with the tuning check. Alright, I will bring you in for a closer look at the actual saddle, but first I wanted to cover the steps I went through. What you see here, this was my first run at the saddle when I made that first elliptical cut on the leading edge. So the low D was 15 cents sharp and it needed to come down. This is the calligraphy I use here. It needed to come down quite a bit, which would reduce the sharpness, and it did. 8 cents, 6 cents, 4 cents, 1 cent, and 5 cents. So I went back to the knuckle vise with the saddle and shaped it again. And on the second attempt, we had 11, 7, 6, 6. The A string, or second string, was perfectly in tune. We're talking about the 7th fret fretted note here, and its 19th fret octave. Second attempt, we got 1 string in tune. Third attempt, we start to get a little closer. Still that low D on the DADGAD tuning, kind of an oddball gauge, and I'll get into that in a second. So at this point, we were 6 cents sharp on the low D, 1 cent sharp on the A. The middle 2 strings are perfectly in tune. The A, I must have touched it when I was adjusting it because it was now 3 cents flat, and the high D was 2 cents flat. And on the 4th attempt, I got them all lined up all the way across, tic-tac-toe, all 6 strings. Again, we're talking about the fretted 7th fret note on each of these strings and their 19th fret corresponding octave note. Now we'll take a look at the saddle. So as you can see, this low D string really had to come back to the extreme back edge to get it to line up. And by the way, I did actually cut those ramps ahead of the bridge pin holes all the way across. Justin had mentioned that the second string was buzzing, and if you look at the return whine there, I think that was part of the problem. So we've got it lined up all the way across. You can see we've kind of nipped into the saddle for that second string to get that to line up. The other thing I want to mention about the second string is the gauge that came with the set. This was a 17 thou. It would not line up. So I stepped it up from 17 thou to 18 thou. That made the difference. Okay, let's have a look at the nut. So before we zero into the nut and give you a close-up, this is where it started. So what you see here, these are the numbers for the original nut before I made a compensated nut. These are the 4 stages I went through with. In the beginning, it was 6 cents flat, 4 cents flat, 5 cents flat, 4 cents flat, 6 and 2. Middle 2 strings at this point were perfect. The A string, which is the second string, DADGAD tuning, was 6 cents flat. And the D string was 2 cents flat. Now next time through, I managed to get that 6th string perfectly in tune, And I had gone a little too far with the A string. It was now 5 cents sharp. The D string lined up perfectly, the G was perfect, and this A was still 8 cents flat. Now what I'm talking about is fretting the 12th fret note, tuning the guitar, tuning that string to that fretted 12th fret note, and then playing the open string. And this was the discrepancy on that second string. The high D string, or first string, we got that line right up. And then finally, on the last run, I got all 6 strings. So 12 fretted note and the open string all the way across, all 6 strings are perfectly in tune. And the reason I got that second string to line up is, like I mentioned a second ago, I stepped up the gauge from 17th thou plain to an 18th thou plain. And that did it. So let's have a look at this nut. And this is where we ended up. The first string was ahead of the end of the fingerboard. It was cantilevered. The B string, the A string was the only one that was close to its natural position. You can see I've cut that back a little bit. And all the other strings were way forward of the end of the fingerboard to get them to line up. Now, I didn't mention this, but at the beginning of the video, you can see, too, that when I play the open string and fret the first fret note, they're in tune all the way across. Mission completed. And again, this is Dadgad tuning. 13, 18, 24, 32, 42, 53. Really, you notice the difference already?
Oh yeah, it was in tune down here. When it came up to 4, it wouldn't be in tune. That sort of
Interesting. I did tighten the truss rod a little bit. I didn't lower it a lot. You know, when you're playing finger style, it's like, you know, you think of like a classical guitar, how high the action is on a classical. There's a reason for that. So you need the room. And the other thing is, you know, you can't be arbitrary about it because the action, the intonation, the lay of the neck, everything is set now, like for that action. I did drop it down a little tiny bit, but not very much.